Hey everyone, before we dive into today's story, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell you sits in that uncomfortable space between documented history and the kind of secrets that powerful people would rather stay buried. Some of what you're going to hear is verified fact. Some of it comes from sources that died under mysterious circumstances, from classified documents that were supposedly destroyed, and from witnesses who probably wish they'd never seen what they saw. This is the story of Die Glocke, the bell, and it might be the most closely guarded secret to come out of Nazi Germany. It's late 1944, and the Third Reich is collapsing. Soviet forces are advancing from the east, the Allies are pushing from the west, and anyone paying attention knows that Germany has lost this war. But here's the thing. The Nazi leadership? They weren't acting like defeated men. They were moving massive resources, top scientists, and unimaginable amounts of materials into secret projects scattered across occupied territories. One of those projects had a code name, Kronos. Now I know what you're thinking. Secret Nazi experiments, wonder weapons. We've heard it all before, right? The V-2 rockets, the jet fighters, all the desperate attempts to turn the tide of war. But Die Glocke was different. This wasn't about building a better bomb or a faster plane. This was something else entirely. Something that, if even half the reports are true, shouldn't have been possible with 1940s technology. Let me paint you a picture of where this all supposedly took place. Deep in Lower Silesia, in what's now Poland, there was a complex of mines near a place called Ludwikowice. The Germans called the area Der Riese, the Giant. This wasn't just one facility. It was an enormous underground network, tunnels carved into the mountains, bunkers hidden beneath tons of concrete and earth. The official story was that this was an industrial complex, maybe a fuel depot, maybe weapons manufacturing. But witnesses who worked there, they told a different story. According to these accounts, in a specially constructed chamber deep underground, there was a device unlike anything else in the German arsenal. It was bell-shaped, about 9 feet wide, and 12 to 15 feet high. The outer casing was made of a hard, heavy ceramic material, and beneath that were 2 counter-rotating cylinders. The whole thing was described as being filled with a metallic liquid that had a violet-purple color. They called this substance Serum 525, though what that actually was remains a mystery to this day. Now here's where it gets interesting. The bell wasn't left sitting idle. According to Igor Witkowski, and we'll talk more about him in a minute, when Die Glocke was activated, it would emit a pale blue glow. The cylinders would spin in opposite directions, and the device would consume enormous amounts of electrical power. We're talking about power levels that seem absurd for the 1940s. And then people started dying. The research team working on Die Glocke reportedly consisted of Germany's top scientists. We're talking about physicists who understood things that most of their contemporaries couldn't even conceive of. But here's the disturbing part. Of the initial team of 7 scientists working directly with the bell, 5 of them died during the testing phase. They didn't die in explosions. They didn't die from conventional radiation poisoning. The symptoms were strange. Metallic taste in the mouth, a sensation of pins and needles in the extremities, loss of memory and mental clarity, muscle spasms, and a gradual but irreversible decay of biological tissue. Plants and animals used in the tests would decompose into a black goo within hours. Human subjects? And yes, there were human subjects. This was the SS we're talking about. Would develop crystalline formations in their blood and tissue. The project was supposedly overseen by SS General Hans Kammler. Now, if you don't know that name, Kammler was one of the most dangerous men in Nazi Germany. He was the architect behind the concentration camp system, a brilliant engineer, and toward the end of the war, he was put in charge of Germany's most advanced weapons programs. V-2 rockets, that was Kammler. Underground factories, Kammler. And according to the evidence, Die Glocke was his pet project. Here's what makes Kammler interesting. His fate is officially unknown. In the chaos of Germany's collapse in 1945, Kammler simply vanished. The official Nazi records say he committed suicide on May 9th, 1945, but his body was never found. His staff gave conflicting accounts. Some said he shot himself, others said he was shot by his own adjutant, and still others claimed he disappeared days before the alleged suicide date. What if Kammler didn't die? What if he, and the knowledge of the bell, went somewhere else? Most of what we know about Die Glocke comes from a Polish military journalist and historian named Igor Witkowski. In the late 1990s, Witkowski claimed he was given access to classified transcripts from the interrogation of SS officer Jakob Sporenberg. Sporenberg was a high-ranking SS general who was captured by the British and later handed over to Poland, where he was tried for war crimes. During his interrogation, according to Witkowski, Sporenberg talked about a secret project that he had guarded in Lower Silesia. He described the bell, its effects, the deaths of scientists, and the extreme security measures surrounding the facility. But here's the problem. Witkowski says he was only allowed to view these documents, not photograph or copy them. They were shown to him by a Polish intelligence contact, and then they disappeared back into classified archives. So we have to take his word for it. And that makes a lot of people skeptical. Critics point out that there's no independent verification of these documents. Sporenberg was indeed a real person. He was indeed executed for war crimes, but the transcripts Witkowski describes have never been made public. Some researchers claim that Witkowski embellished or invented details. Others say he's telling the truth, but that governments have actively suppressed the evidence. So who do we believe? Well, here's what we do know for certain. The Der Ries complex is real. You can visit it today. There are massive underground structures, reinforced chambers, and a lot of construction that doesn't match the official explanations. There are also strange concrete structures in the area that have puzzled researchers for decades. One of them is a circular concrete ring, heavily reinforced, that locals call the henge. It sits in an isolated area and serves no apparent purpose. When people have tested the soil and vegetation around this structure, they've found unusual radiation signatures and abnormal plant growth. Trees in the area grow in strange patterns, twisted and deformed. Now that could be natural, or it could be the residue of something else. So let's say, just for argument's sake, that the bell was real. What was it actually designed to do? This is where the theories get wild, and I want to be clear that we're entering speculation territory here. But these are the ideas that serious researchers have proposed. Theory 1. It was an experimental propulsion system. Some researchers believe Die Glocke was an attempt to create an anti-gravity device. The counter-rotating cylinders, the mysterious liquid, the massive power consumption. It all sounds suspiciously like descriptions of theoretical field propulsion. If the Nazis were experimenting with manipulating gravitational or electromagnetic fields, it might explain the biological effects. Intense electromagnetic fields can absolutely mess with living tissue. Theory 2. It was a time travel experiment. Yeah, I know how that sounds, but remember the codename Kronos, the Greek god of time. Some researchers have suggested that the bell was an attempt to manipulate space-time itself, possibly based on theoretical physics that was emerging in the 1930s. Einstein's work on relativity, the early quantum mechanics theories. Some very smart people were thinking about the nature of time, and the Nazis employed a lot of very smart people. Theory 3. It was an exotic weapon. Maybe the bell wasn't designed to fly or to bend time. Maybe it was designed to kill. A device that could emit radiation or field effects that would sicken and destroy biological tissue while leaving structures intact could be a terrifying weapon. And the Nazis were certainly desperate enough to try anything. Or Theory 4, it was all of the above. Maybe they didn't entirely know what they were building. Maybe they were experimenting with physics they didn't fully understand, and the bell was just whatever emerged from that research. Now here's where the story takes an even stranger turn. In the final days of the war, as Soviet forces closed in on Lower Silesia, something happened at the Der Riese complex. According to Witkowski's sources, the entire scientific team, around 60 people, were executed by the SS. They were shot and buried in a mass grave to ensure they could never talk about what they'd worked on. The facility was hastily demolished in places, documents were burned, and the bell itself disappeared. Some researchers believe it was evacuated to Norway, where the Germans still held territory in early 1945. There are reports of a heavy, bell-shaped object being loaded onto a Junkers Ju-390 long-range aircraft at an airfield in Norway, shortly before Germany's surrender. Where that plane went, if it even existed, nobody knows for certain. Others believe the bell was shipped to South America. In the decades after the war, there were numerous sightings of Nazi officials who were supposed to be dead, living comfortably in Argentina and Chile. What if Kammler was one of them? What if he took the bell and a small team of scientists with him? And then there's the really wild theory that the bell ended up in American hands through Operation Paperclip, the secret program that brought Nazi scientists to the United States. We know for a fact that the U.S. military scrambled to secure German technology before the Soviets could get it. We know they brought over scientists who had done horrible things in the name of research. We know there were secret projects that remained classified for decades. Is it really so hard to believe that if the bell existed, someone would have wanted it? Let's talk about the evidence, or the lack thereof. The German records from the war are incomplete. Vast amounts of documentation were destroyed, either by retreating Nazis trying to cover their tracks or by Allied bombing. The files that do exist are scattered across archives in multiple countries, and some remain classified even today. So the absence of official documentation about Die Glocke doesn't necessarily mean it didn't exist. It might just mean that the documentation was successfully destroyed or is still hidden. Then there are the witness accounts. Beyond Witkowski's claims about the Sporenberg interrogation, there are scattered testimonies from people who lived near the Der Riese complex. Some remember seeing strange lights in the sky, hearing unusual sounds from underground, and noticing that the SS guarded certain areas with fanatical intensity. But these are old memories now, filtered through time, and it's hard to know what's real and what's been embellished. Physicists have weighed in on whether the bell could have worked as described. Most are skeptical. The idea of a device in the 1940s creating antigravity or manipulating time seems laughable with our current understanding of physics. But then again, our current understanding of physics admits that we don't understand about 95% of the universe. Dark matter and dark energy are still mysteries. And there are fringe areas of research, things like the Biefeld-Brown effect and electrogravitics, that suggest maybe, just maybe, there are ways to manipulate fields that mainstream science hasn't fully explored. What we can say with certainty is this: the Nazis were working on advanced technology that was ahead of its time. They had the first operational jet fighters, the first cruise missiles, the first ballistic missiles. They were researching nuclear weapons, chemical weapons, and biological weapons. They poured resources into projects that seemed like science fiction. Is it really impossible that they tried to build something even more exotic? Here's what bothers me most about the Die Glocke story. It's not the lack of proof. It's not even the wild theories. It's the pattern. Throughout history, whenever there's a major technological leap, there are always rumors of secret research, hidden projects, and breakthroughs that the public doesn't hear about until decades later. The Manhattan Project was completely secret until the bombs fell on Japan. The SR-71 Blackbird was in development for years before anyone knew it existed. Stealth technology, drone warfare, the internet itself, all of these started as classified military projects. So when people dismiss Die Glocke as a conspiracy theory, as Nazi mythology with no basis, in fact, I have to ask, would we even know if it was real? If a secret project from 1944 was successful, and if powerful people wanted it to stay secret, what are the chances that we'd have clear, undeniable proof lying around for researchers to find? The absence of evidence is not evidence of absence, especially when we're dealing with one of the most secretive, paranoid, and ruthless regimes in modern history, working on projects in the final desperate days of a losing war. Let me tell you about one more thing, and then I'll let you draw your own conclusions. In the town of Kecksburg, Pennsylvania, in December 1965, something fell from the sky. Witnesses described it as a fireball that streaked across multiple states before crash landing in the woods outside town. When people rushed to the site, they found something in the woods. It was metallic, shaped like an acorn or a bell, with strange writing around the base that looked like Egyptian hieroglyphics. Within hours, the U.S. military cordoned off the area. They brought in flatbed trucks, loaded something large and covered onto them, and hauled it away. Official statements said it was a meteorite. Later they said it was nothing at all, that people had simply seen a fireball in the sky and imagined the rest. But witnesses insist they saw it. They saw the object, they saw the military response, and they noticed something else. The object they described looked remarkably similar to descriptions of Die Glocke. Now, I'm not saying Kecksburg was the bell. I'm not saying Nazi superscience created a time machine that crashed in Pennsylvania 20 years after the war. But I am saying it's a hell of a coincidence. So where does that leave us? Die Glocke might be exactly what skeptics say it is. A tall tale, a mixture of misinterpreted facts and creative fiction, a legend that grew in the absence of clear documentation. Igor Witkowski might have embellished his sources or been fed misinformation. The witnesses might have misremembered. The strange effects around Der Riese might have natural explanations, or Die Glocke might be real. It might have been an experimental device that pushed the boundaries of 1940s science. It might have worked in ways that even its creators didn't fully understand. It might have been evacuated in the war's final days, hidden away by people who recognized its value. And it might still exist somewhere, locked in a vault, classified at levels above top secret, studied by scientists who can never talk about their work. We know the Nazis were capable of atrocities. We know they pursued science without ethical boundaries. We know they were desperate and delusional enough to believe they could still win even as their country burned around them. And we know that in the aftermath of the war, both the Americans and the Soviets grabbed every piece of German technology they could find, every scientist they could capture, every scrap of research that might give them an advantage in the coming Cold War. In that context, is the bell really so unbelievable? I'll leave you with this thought. Every major government on Earth has classified projects. There are military bases you can't visit, research programs that won't be declassified for 50 years, and technologies being developed in secret right now. We accept this as normal. We understand that some things are kept hidden for national security, but we also know that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, those secrets involve things that sound impossible, things that would change our understanding of physics.